in a fight billed as Repeat or Revenge. Future Hall of Famers Riddick Big Daddy Bowe and Evander the Real Deal Holyfield were fated to meet for one of the most anticipated rematches of the 1990s. Their initial encounter, Ring Magazine's 1992 Fight of the Year, featured intense back-and-forth action with a 10th round that rivals any single frame of heavyweight fighting. It was Big Daddy that claimed the decision victory, taking the World Championship from Holyfield. The two had stayed busy since their last encounter. Bowe visited the Pope and literally threw his WBC belt into a trash can. Holyfield bought some land and started raising horses. But the glitz and glamour of heavyweight stardom could never distract them from what most felt was unfinished business. Holyfield wanted the title he felt was rightfully his back. With the new head trainer, the legendary Emmanuel Stewart, Holyfield maintained top standing in the heavyweight roster, beating Alex Stewart via unanimous decision. Bowe defended the two belts he hadn't thrown in the trash twice, finishing his foes in less than a combined 6 minutes. And while those results were impressive, many, including Holyfield's camp, felt that Bowe wasn't facing opposition befitting a champion. For that, he would need to put the doubters to rest by diving back into the fire, reigniting his rivalry with the Real Deal. The build-up was fairly cordial. Even so, fans had nothing to worry about. The reason these two brought out the best in each other wasn't because of any inherent animosity. It was simply the result of what happens when two elite competitors in their prime meet heavy opposition in the ring. This mentality was on full display during their first fight. In their first fight, Holyfield had banked on tiring Bowe, outpacing him with fluid footwork, fast combinations, and close-range bullying. Being a mid-range in-and-out fighter, Holyfield needed to be an expert at all ranges. That way he could transition between ranges with ease, pecking away and setting distance traps. But Bowe's jab had proven problematic at long range, and he had shown himself to be Holyfield's near equal at mid-range. Big tall men are supposed to lean back to stay safe, giving Holyfield the opportunity to set up body shots and cut angles. But Bowe had ducked under the smaller man's punches, setting up new lines of attack for himself. However, Holyfield's biggest blunder had been trying to out-wrestle Bowe at close range. Holyfield supposed that he could choose one shoulder to sandwich his head into to stay safe from punches on the opposite side. In order to throw his right with full power, Bowe should have had to move his head away so he could swing into his punch. And when he did do this, Holyfield had some success with countering. However, there is one punch where you don't have to change head positions to obtain a lot of power: the diagonal uppercut. Bowe had pulverized Holyfield with these throughout the fight, until he had landed one so devastating that it almost ended the night then and there. Holyfield's adamantium chin had just barely saved him. The uppercut was Bowe's second best punch. Being the quintessential boxer puncher, the cross was his first. And here too, he had shown the ability to catch Holyfield even when he tried to duck and pull outside. Bowe's specialty was breaking through guards and tracking head movement after all. So when the night of the second fight arrived, everyone expected a new game plan and a lot of adjustments from the former champ. In that regard, Holyfield would more than meet their expectations. But before that could happen, Bowe decided to start the fight off with a bang, lobbing a right that smacked into Holyfield's temple. Evander stumbled, but quickly regained his composure. He danced around, strafing back and forth, but Bowe was relentless. So the Real Deal moved inside, displaying his excellent head movement. But Bowe slapped him around for his troubles, reminding Holyfield that staying immobile was a bad idea. However, Holyfield was no slouch. He stepped back, then paused in a crouch, inviting Bowe to attack. Then he moved away at an angle when Bowe took the bait. The frantic assault was over. There would be no first round KO. And now the audience could see the true dynamics of how the fight would actually play out. It was a war of jabs. Holyfield did his best work doubling up, swatting away Bowe's jab to angle inside. Bowe's jab worked best when he was able to set down, sinking his weight and using his long reach to its full potential. But at the end of the first, neither man had proven dominant. As of yet. But in round 2, Bowe seemed to get inside of Holyfield's rhythm, timing his movement to lean in with heavy jabs. Holyfield lobbed an overhand and followed with a much tighter lead hook, but rather than back Bowe up, he nearly bounced off. Holyfield could bully and intimidate much bigger men, and often had, but it seemed that he could not intimidate Big Daddy Bowe. That didn't stop him from trying. He swayed into a tremendous lead hook that would have done massive damage to Bowe had it connected. Bowe just continued his nonchalant march forward and tried a long 1-2, but Holyfield wisely faded back. He had learned from their first encounter not to trust head movement alone. But lest anyone thought he had given up on close-range tactics entirely, Holyfield pressed in to infight. For some reason unbeknownst to Bowe, Evander had much greater success than the last time. But even so, he didn't push his luck. The two had one final exchange to close off the round, Bowe attempting 1-2s, but Evander lead cross-blocking the first, and once more fading back for the second. If this new defense held up, then Holyfield had already taken away one of Bowe's 2 signature power punches. Holyfield may have found solid defenses against Bowe's cross, but in the third, it became apparent that his jabs were still a big problem. Bowe was doubling up with his left, prompting a reaction with the first, and capitalizing on that reaction with the second. But this still wasn't enough to set up his right. Holyfield let Bowe fly right past on his first attempt. He not only cross-blocked Bowe's next attempt, he added on a counter right of his own. Now Holyfield started piling on, picking away at any cracks he could find in Bowe's defense. So far, Bowe was winning the jab war, but Holyfield had the edge when it came to landing power punches. Regardless, the night was still young, and when these two gladiators shared the same ring, anything could happen. Both men tried to build where they were strongest in the fourth, but it was Bowe who took the lead, countering from mid and close range. Holyfield turned the tables by deciding to risk infighting. As the battle raged on, it became apparent which adjustments Holyfield had made to deal with Bowe's uppercut. First, he often kept his head on the opposite side, risking rear hooks rather than rear uppers. Second, he pummeled his hand over Bowe's to bar it. Roberto Duran liked to use a similar tactic. With just this small bit of breathing room, Holyfield started sinking in tight hooks, finally able to stand toe-to-toe with his nemesis. The two worked themselves into a frenzy, fighting even after the bell, each looking to get the final punch in. While Holyfield had not completely dominated on the inside, he had shown Bowe that he could now be competitive there. But that wasn't what was concerning Bowe at the moment. He had been cut above the eye in the fourth, and in the fifth, it started to show. For the first time, Holyfield had the more effective jab, whipping Bowe's head around and backing him up. The big punch of the round was an overhand right, thrown off a parry. Bowe was taking major damage. For maybe the first time, there was a round that all the announcers and the crowd could agree upon. Holyfield had won this one decisively. Afterwards, Emanuel Stewart flipped into the ring. But believe it or not, it would be far from the strangest ring entry this night. Holyfield continued his domination in the 6th, seemingly on his way to taking the fight. No matter what he threw, he just could not seem to miss. Bowe was getting pushed back, until nearly halfway through the round, Holyfield landed a hard 1-2, and some part of Bowe seemed to wake up. He now pushed forward, shooting out his jab and refusing to give ground. Evander kept up his assault, but perhaps Riddick had realized that if he was going to take punishment regardless, it was best to attack at the same time. Maybe he just didn't fear Holyfield's power, as Big George Foreman had suggested from the announcer's booth. With only 30 seconds left in the round, Bowe's jab started to find a home. Perhaps the cut had finally ceased impairing his vision, following up with a fierce right that convinced Holyfield to stop attacking and circle away. On the brink of defeat, Bowe had muscled through on sheer willpower. If his jab was working again, then he was still in the game. The 7th would be telling. But Holyfield soon got inside of Bowe's hook to land a terrific right. Bowe responded with a furious 11-punch combination. Holyfield turned and cover blocked to defend Bowe's hooks, then faded back to just barely avoid taking real damage with the massive right. He ducked under Bowe's hook, double cross-blocked his uppercut, and barely pulled another right to miss a counter left. Bowe's finishing jab was the only punch of the 11 to land completely clean, but that didn't deter Bowe. If the jab was the only punch landing, then he would land it as much as he could. He drove Holyfield back. Holyfield went into the clinch, and then a man on a motorized parachute crashed into the ring. The parachuter, who would forever become known as Fan Man, did this kind of thing fairly regularly, pulling the same stunt at multiple sporting events across the world. The Fan Man incident would become immortalized in pop culture and remembered as a bizarre but humorous occurrence in sports history. But in the moment, it was no laughing matter. Bowe's pregnant wife fainted from shock, and both boxers were thrown off of their game both mentally and physically. Each tried to stay warm so as not to get stiff going back into the match. But the flow of the bout had been altered, and history will never know what might have happened had the two not been interrupted mid-battle. Almost immediately, Bowe's manager had knocked Fan Man unconscious. Him, his parachute, his fan, and the rest of the trash were cleared away after several minutes. And finally, the epic battle could continue. While common sense said that Bowe should be the one to benefit from the extra recovery time, the boxer with the advantage is probably the one that gets to talk to master strategist Emanuel Stewart for several minutes. For whatever reason, Holyfield came out with an entirely different toolkit than before, trading his hook cross combination for tight straights that pierced through Bowe's guard. He also did a much better job controlling Bowe's right hand at close range to prevent uppercuts. Holyfield kept his edge throughout the 8th, although he didn't get it all his own way. Bowe landed some nice long-range counters, and his body shots continued to sink in at close range. Although Holyfield was finding he was taking far less damage infighting than he had in their first encounter. No defense is foolproof, but Holyfield was stopping the large majority of uppercuts from getting through. So in the 9th, Bowe went back to basics, using his jab like a battering ram to break through the real deal's defenses. Whenever Bowe doubled down on his jab, the fight was his. Tired of being continuously cornered, Holyfield once more tried his luck at close range. But Bowe had more in his arsenal than just uppercuts. He expertly targeted openings in Holyfield's defenses, regardless of which guard or position he was using. Although Holyfield came on strong at the very tail end of the round, Bowe was the one to close it off. Big Daddy had put his foot down to take this round, resetting the tone of the fight with his awesome jab. Despite this, Eddie Futch told Bowe to rough Holyfield up in the 10th, seemingly hoping to tempt him into trading. And with 1 minute left, the strategy paid off, just not for Bowe. Evander started taking more risks while infighting, cashing in on all the prior work he had put in. Bowe's mouthpiece went flying. Just then, the round came to a close. The action was even more intense in the 11th. Once again, most of the exchanges took place at close range. Bowe tried a lead hook, and Holyfield rode it back, tucking his head in Bowe's rear shoulder. This left him vulnerable to Bowe's lead uppercuts. But those weren't nearly as big of a deal, and the position came with the added benefit of loading up Holyfield's lead hooks. The real deal was in his groove now. This is likely how Holyfield had envisioned the first fight going. He took some shots, but evaded most, all the while controlling Bowe's arms and creating new angles to line up heavy power blows. The two separated. Bowe jabbed, and Holyfield landed a textbook counter right. A moment later, Evander pulled the same trick again. But the bell struck the end of the 11th, and Holyfield would have to wait to lay his hands on Bowe once more. Both men had lasted until the midnight round, and now each had one final chance to show the world who truly deserved the title of champion. The bell sung out, and Bowe charged forward, lashing out with the intensity of a berserker in a blood rage. Undaunted, Holyfield stood firm, picking his moments to retaliate, walking the line between intelligence and aggression. Now more than ever, Holyfield seemed obsessed with controlling Bowe's rear hand. He was well aware he could lose all of the effort he had put into this fight if just one of Big Daddy's uppercuts got through. And then, one got through, and Holyfield's mouthguard went flying. Now, at the very end, Bowe had been granted one final chance. He surged forward, tearing into Holyfield, stunning him. But Holyfield held on. Referee Mills Lane judged that it was time to pause the fight now that the action had ceased. Bowe cursed at losing his one best chance at a miraculous last round KO. For Holyfield, this was just one more grudge for him to repay. Evander came back with a vengeance, giving all he had left to the final bell and beyond. Yet again, the fight devolved into a brawl, with both men needing to be torn apart. Stewart grabbed Holyfield, but tripped on a man trying to get into the ring, taking Holyfield down with him. Bowe finally had his rival on the canvas, but through no doing of his own. The judges rendered their decision, and Evander Holyfield was pronounced the winner. Against all odds, he had become one of the few elite heavyweights to take the championship back. However, the two were fated to fight once more. and that one would not go to decision. If you'd like to learn more about the sweet science, you can check out my books on footwork, power, and defense, linked below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.